All right. So it's the 21st of May, 2025. We've been running this All Things Go session for the last few months. Professor Mix is on his honeymoon, and this is the last session. So it's like the kids have taken over the classroom, and we get to do whatever
Yay!
we want on the last day of school. Hey, y'all.
Hello.
Hello,
So
hello.
And thanks for being here, Lewis, Adrian, Chris. We were talking just before we pressed record about, the need to intersperse doing difficult things and doing hard things. Um, and we've been similar to that at Gimbalabs. We've been talking about just the seasonality of work and how it feels really good for many months of the year to have weekly sessions like this one, where we dig into Go. Mix took us really deep into those code bases. We'll talk more about that in just a second. Um, we've been digging into Aiken PBL on Tuesdays. We've been doing governance sessions and open dev sessions on Thursdays. And this week, we're closing down all of those sessions just for the next few months. And we're going to spend June, July, and August just really focused on deep work. People are still going to be getting together, and in a collaboration with Odin, the Open Decentralized Innovation Network, there's just a group of people who are going to get together every Monday this summer and launch a sprint. And if you can make it to half of those sprints, you're welcome to do it. They're going to build something. They're going to only meet if they need to focus on one thing per week. They're going to demo for each other on Fridays and keep it going. So Gimbalabs has committed some funds to that work. And if anybody's interested in learning more, just reach out. We'll post links to Gimbalabs Discord with this video. Um, but it's timely because here we're closing out these weekly All Things Go sessions. And one thing that we might pick up over the summer is to spend a week maybe getting the Cardano Go PBL course into shape. And so I wanted to close out these weekly sessions by just taking a look at this work in progress. We haven't really touched it in a few months, but we were working on it in 2024 in a similar space. And it may be that this is something that somebody wants to spend, say, a week working on sometime this summer. So let's see. The current course outline looks like this. And we've got, what do we got? Like 10 modules, and each one has some number of learning targets. And just to start, let's just get situated. We've talked about the need for this course to include a couple of different things. We had an overview of some tooling, right? Just knowing enough about Cardano, knowing the basics of Ouroboros, and then introducing a couple of key libraries. And I want to come back and see if these are the right ones. But just to keep going with getting an overview of the course, right? We say, look, here's some background knowledge. There's no need for there to really be like an assignment here. Often at this point in the course, we just give people stuff to read about. But then we start to do things. And that's what's happening in, oh, this is not the best way to navigate there, though. That's what's happening in this module, right? Where we haven't even finished completely the learning targets yet, but we were having some ideas about this is what we want people to do first. Hey, interact with the node, right? Run this starter kit, do a couple of things, fetch a block, check the sync state, fetch the mempool. And and that's what I really wanted to look at today. So, right, knowing that the course then continues with other hands-on modules. And I love these titles, right? Reacting, that's a verb. How do I react to chain events? How do I query the blockchain? Then we can touch on application smart contract. How do I serialize data, right? But does this feel like the right order? And then tying it back to what Chris was saying a few minutes ago, how can we balance challenging conceptual stuff with easy wins for people so that, this course feels both relevant, but also like something that people want to keep working through. So let's start there. Does this as the first active module still feel like a good idea? And do these feel like good things for people to do first?
I think so.
Yeah.
So it's still easy enough, especially with the starter kit. In fact, we've expanded on the starter kit, so there's a couple other
Yeah.
things that we could add, which are all interacting with the node, um, that are fairly easy concepts to understand. However, there is a little bit of complexity in them. So like you can make it as deep as you want, kind of, because there's a lot of things that can be done. So, but I do think that this is good.
And I like that this is right where so much of what we talk about in Go is its fitness for scalable infrastructure. And so we might as well start with the most important infrastructure that you need to be able to talk to. And once we do this, then talking transactions and then reacting to chain events. Is this the right order? I can imagine putting reacting to chain events before building transactions, but it kind of depends on how much we want to emphasize this stack at this moment in time.
I think building a simple transaction is easier than the other one.
Yeah, in this case, it is because we're just going to use like an API or something, right?
Hmm.
I mean, with Apollo, I think that was the idea. So it's like we don't need all of the complex data stuff, and I think it is a little bit easier to show the creation of transactions because we're only talking simple transactions here with like
Yeah,
metadata, that sort of stuff, not a contract,
right.
right? So we're still talking a little bit of simplicity and then going to reacting to chain events kind of after it. So you start off with like, here's how we talk to the thing. Here's what we're going to build and submit. Here's how we're going to react to these events happening. You get what I'm saying? Because like otherwise, it's
Yeah.
almost
I need to understand what the event I'm reacting to is before I
yeah.
Could
react.
it be
Right,
the
right. Otherwise, it's like you're almost having to do a flashback in the middle, right? To where
could
you're
it
like, okay, we're reacting to an event, and we've got the event. What is it now, right? And you have to like and go back to before we should have. So I do think that this is the right order. Yeah,
could it be the simple transaction we later react to?
Yes,
exactly, exactly.
exactly. Beautiful. All right, so we build this transaction here. Bursa is still definitely supported, right? This is I haven't played with it
Yep,
lately.
yep. Yeah, it's
Apollo's good enough to use for these purposes.
sign a transaction, submit a transaction with Goroboros. That one's an interesting one, but yes, absolutely. Validity interval and trivial metadata. Yep. Yeah, all that's easy.
Is there a better way we can submit a more approachable way, or should we
What
build
does that
one?
even say?
Right. Well, right. I don't know what we meant when we wrote
No,
this.
no, no. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure I know what it means. I'm curious. Does
So
it
I
have
mean, so
detail?
in a right, I don't I'm not familiar enough with the submit mechanism for Goroboros.
Got it. Okay. All right. So when we're saying submit with Goroboros here, what we're saying is you're submitting to a node.
That's all.
So
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
serializing it and sending it to an API. You're
Yeah.
sending it directly to a node,
Yeah.
right? And the two ways to do that are, via either node to node or node to client. In this case, it would probably be node to client. We're just going to talk to the node that's you're
Yes.
already running, right? Yeah.
Yes. Cool.
So submit a transaction to a node with Goroboros. And in
Okay.
fact, we should have already some example of that, probably in the starter kit. Let me see. I believe we do, and if we don't, we should. We don't. Okay. But we can add that to the starter kit,
Cool.
right? So
Cool. And once we, I mean, if we, especially here, so we submit a simple transaction, now we have an artifact to reference. And if we put some simple metadata up, that this is another tried and true pattern from PPBL. Here's another artifact to reference. And then we go to module 103. Okay, now we're going to start reacting to these events. What kind of events? Transactions. Hey, let's find this transaction and this transaction and take a look at them.
Exactly, exactly.
Beautiful. Add or starter kit, configuration, filtering by event. Yep, filtering transactions. This just this drills down perfectly. Filtering by metadata is not here, but we can show people the results of filtering by address and just find that metadata in the results. That's fine.
Correct. We don't actually have a filter by metadata, specifically in Adder. And yes, that's actually the answer is you filter by to transactions or by transactions by address, and then you would essentially post filter it.
We could
Um,
even give the assignment here that people could try to implement their own metadata filter,
that would be interesting. Yes,
right?
that could
Maybe as a
definitely happen.
challenge.
It's definitely a challenge because there's a lot of deserialization that would need to happen
Okay.
first, right? Like you see what I'm saying? So the main reason with a lot of the way that Atlas designs it's designed to be a broad brush. So I mean, right?
Yeah.
It's not designed to filter always to the exact thing that you need. And this is kind of like a design decision, so that instead you kind of keep like again a broader stroke, and then through that broader stroke, you're now handling the events yourself. Right. Meaning you're doing your business, you're keeping your business logic out of Adder. That's basically it. Is
Yeah. Yeah.
the more fine-grained the filtering ends up being in Adder, the more you're relying on Adder to essentially handle your business logic.
Right. But
So by
would you say that using Adder as a library in the same project where I'm writing additional business logic, that's the correct way to use it, right?
Generally, yes, that's generally it, right? Is if you're using it in that way, or if you're not using it as a library, you could be using it as a webhook
Yep.
or
Yep.
a post to something else, to some other receiver, right? That has your custom business logic or things like that.
Yeah.
Again, the idea really is with Adder is to kind of use a broad stroke.
Right. Right.
Uh, Right, because again, you get too granular with it, and you've now created basically your own new programming language,
Right.
and we kind of want to avoid that.
Right. But we like, would you say in this module it's okay to suggest to people some business
Absolutely.
logic they might want to try to write?
Yeah, and filtering by metadata would absolutely be one.
All right. Play with that. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. And what's interesting is how we have random examples of literally any of
Yes.
these things in our
Yeah.
code somewhere.
Right.
And I mean, so like just to tell you like real quick here, for example, while we don't have filtering by metadata in Adder, we
Hmm.
do have filtering by metadata in TX top.
Hmm.
Because TX top, we filter by metadata to be able to find things like min swap trades, or things like that, right? In some cases, because there are things like, especially Dex Hunter. So the way we're able to tell the difference between a Dex Hunter initiated min swap trade and a user initiated min swap trade is Dex Hunter adds metadata.
Hmm.
Right. So we're doing a metadata search. And of course, when you get down to the underlying transaction types in Goroboros and this sort of thing, you start to realize that, hey, wait a minute, I can do things that that other code is doing because it's working on the same primitive that I already have.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's also where I kind of like where we try not to filter too much in adder, because if you start filtering again too much, then you start getting into the granularity of the shape of that object,
Right. Exactly.
right? If I'm giving you full transactions,
Right.
right, then all of the functions that we've already built for digging into transactions, getting witnesses out of it, whatever kind of crazy stuff you want to do is already available. But
That's
if we give you
common.
very specific, yeah, it's common, exactly. But if we give you very specific, like, oh, you want metadata that looks like this,
Exactly.
now the thing that we're outputting is shaped different,
Well,
right?
metadata and datum are your business logic,
Right,
right? They're custom to the solution. And so, of
right.
course, whatever else somebody builds here should be too.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, this is good. Okay, so this is a good narrative flow to this point. Then we say, all right, queries.
Hmm.
We left this off without naming tools. What are like what are the first two places we want to point people to? Like, is it too early to introduce like a UTXO RPC here? Or what would you do?
So I believe that might actually be where query providers, click on that guy.
We didn't
Mm.
start a lesson for this one yet. Yeah.
No, okay. All right. So I mean, you're the interesting thing is we're gonna have already used some query provider
Right.
with Apollo.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of neat because rather than us necessarily having to tell everyone everything that's going on under the hood, right? We can have them do things.
Right.
We said like use Apollo, right? And we might configure Apollo and tell them how to configure it without necessarily going into a deep explanation of why, because we have a deep explanation here later, right? Um, this being said, there actually we've added support uh to uh, to Adder
Mhm.
to have its own it, interesting to have its own ability to query a to Kupo actually to query an external
Yeah.
index.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So where we have here like storing and retrieving data,
Hmm.
right? So we say I understand the limits of event handlers and when a more general
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So in this one, we talk about storing and retrieving data, and the idea here is I think we should just add another. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Yeah.
Finish that one later.
And then say, I can enrich event data with query data.
Oh, right. And here we could say from,
Kupo. Let's just say Kupo.
yeah,
Just
for
put it
now.
in just so we
Yeah.
have one. Yeah, we'll just list it. And I mean, it's literally what we have. So this is yeah, yeah, the storing and retrieving again is now it's however you want it, right?
Right.
So, we give an example of that, we show them how to do it, and then we show because now like I said, Adder has the ability to do this for you. So we essentially show them the hard way, right? We show them a problem, we show them the hard way, and then we say, hey, and by the way, you actually don't have to do it the hard way. You can just do it the easy way, right? And this is always kind of like my preferred method of teaching, especially things that are kind of hard. Because if you show everyone the easy way right away, they're never going to want to learn the hard way, right? It's like, oh, well, why would I do that? I have the answer here, right? So we want to show them the hard way so that they have the understanding, and then immediately show them. But by the way, right, save yourself some time. And there might be reasons you want to do things the hard way, like you need to over optimize, like you need to optimize, or you need to do things like that, that might uh, be necessary for your use case. So you want to understand it, but it doesn't always mean every use case you should always start from scratch and do everything the hard way, right?
That.
Many times, many problems are solved and you don't have to resolve them.
When is the right moment to use someone else's abstraction? And right,
And
how do I control?
right.
How do I know?
That's exactly. How do I know? How do I know when the right answer is just use somebody else's library,
Yeah,
right? And this is where you hear me talk a lot about the business logic versus like what's generic and what should be in like adder and that
right.
sort of thing. Is I've kind of made that decision for people, insofar as like where I draw that line.
Mhm.
To where it's like we want this to be very generic, and then if you have business logic, you put it in, and if you want more specificity, use it as a library, embed it, and do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. This is the same exact question somebody should be asking if they're using an LLM to support their code, right? It's the same thing as pulling in somebody else's package, right? You need
Absolutely,
to be able
absolutely.
to assess that the code actually does the thing, and there's a
Right,
certain baseline you need to do that safely.
right, absolutely.
So how's this? So like we introduced this concept. So no, we've already been using an indexer. So let's move this one up, right? I understand the indexer, its practical concerns.
Okay.
I understand the limits of the event handler and when I might need more general query data. And then
Ooh,
here,
okay. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And
Good.
now here, let's talk about the idea of a query provider. Here's how to select one, and let's use it to store, retrieve data and to enrich the event data that we were originally working with some query data, because this
I
is how
would
we get to production.
no,
No?
I would actually now swap store and retrieve data and select the right provider.
Okay. So we show you, hey, here's just the model. Here's what we're going to be doing, storing and retrieving. By the way, there's many providers you might use here.
Well, it's more a case of in the store and retrieve, you're going to be storing and retrieve it all yourself.
Yeah.
So there is no query provider. And now the shortcut
Okay.
is query provider, right? And then the and then so we talk about how we can enrich data. So now, you can take 2013 and 2014 and you can put them together yourself,
Right.
or 2015, by the way.
I can store, so this is, I can store and retrieve data using my indexer or using adder
Sure, using adder. Let's just say using adder.
for now.
Yeah. I mean, because it's going to be adder and something else.
Right.
Postgres,
Right.
whatever, but however, whatever we choose.
I'll leave it like, yeah, the fewer words, the better. And then we take
Yep.
people into what that really means. Okay. And then we say, all right, let's talk query providers so that you can get this global data. We've seen these limitations. We can work within those limitations. It's even better to grab data that somebody's already serving,
Right.
or even that you are serving, right? This is you ultimately may decide to run your own Kupo instance. Great.
Right.
This
Right.
just
Or
gets you there.
yeah, or even beyond that, like in Apollo, it has its own provider.
Mhm.
I mean, its own methods of providers. So your own data can be a provider. And in fact, like we can show an example of
Yeah.
that is that's the way that Bluefin works.
Yes.
Is Bluefin indexes its own data, and then it feeds the data that it has, the correct data that it has, into Apollo.
Hmm.
So, Apollo has a certain set of queries that it needs to be able to support. We already have that data, so we can feed that data to Apollo, right? To meet its requirements to be able to generate a transaction. So we, through our 301 provide 304. You get what I mean? And we show that as an example in Bluefin.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so my point is then of course it could also be Kupo, it could also be you want to use Block Frost, whatever, right? It really depends on your choices. So
Beautiful.
I like
Right.
this.
I like that flow. So then we're going to try to squeeze in apps and smart contracts, building. This is all really, if we're talking about transaction building, we're talking about Apollo.
Yep.
What did we mean here? Tools. We didn't write a lesson for that one. Let's just assume that's an option. Um, Datum and Redeemer, just background knowledge.
Right, right.
And then like high level, how to build an app,
Right.
concerns for production. And I'm going to delete this for now. And if we need a lesson like that later, we'll bring it back. So, right, this is applications and smart contracts. There's some extensions to what you've already learned, 3 lessons about transactions. In
Hmm.
those transactions, we're working with datums and redeemers.
Right.
And oh, right, where's the serialization one? Maybe it's
The
just,
next serialization is the next course.
oh, perfect. So that gets us to the next one. Perfect. Yes, right.
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so these I'll turn these into learning targets later, but that's the basic idea, right? And this feeds us into really manipulating. Okay, there it is. Deeper dive. Beautiful.
Yep.
How's this sequence look as 5 topics?
Looks good. Looks good.
Okay, I can turn those into learning targets. This makes sense. Okay.
Just curious about the CDDL. Do you think people will use that often?
You know, it's okay. Some broad hypotheses, right? The person who's interested in Cardano Go coding has some
Mm,
interest in building systems that work above a certain scale.
fair. Okay. Then let's add another one then.
Go ahead.
Mixers love to use it.
That's great. Let's add another one then if we're gonna do that.
What would you say?
You're gonna add debugging, reading, protobuf,
Oh, fun. Okay.
because that's your UTXO RPC definition that's shared between all of these languages, right? So Rust, all these things like we're implementing in UTXO RPC is
Yeah.
all protobuf
Yeah.
definition, which creates our gRPC.
Yeah.
That's our code generation. So just like CDDL, it's code generation, but it's definition of the things, right?
Yeah.
And
So,
so it doesn't, yeah,
yeah,
quick
this
intro
is
too. It doesn't have to
very
be
cool. This is really cool, right? Like if you get to this point in the course, if you've done all these other things, there's a
right.
certain point where you might want to just have a little bit of facility to get through,
I would
recognize what's in the CBOR, recognize the CDDDL exists, and recognize that these protobuf definitions are allowing interoperability between tools that people are building.
for sure. And obviously, there would be more time spent on Seaboard,
Yeah.
uh, because of its
Yeah.
use everywhere in
Yeah.
our stuff. You
This
know,
is act we can actually have people doing things here still, right?
right,
Like
right.
I can manipulate and parse, translate CBOR,
Maybe,
deserialize CBOR,
yeah, sure.
something like
Uh, Maybe I can manipulate and understand deserialized,
oh,
right? Because you should already. Well, here we're serializing it.
you've
Yeah, I mean,
been doing it,
yeah.
right?
We're doing. Yeah,
Yeah,
so because we're not expecting people to understand Seaboard. We're expecting them to understand deserialized Seaboard, right? Like
right, right,
the code is you're going to deserialize it, right? But what's the reason for that? Is now
yeah,
need to be able to like understand it, right? Like what does it do? How am I going to figure it out? If I'm just looking at Seaboard, it's just a bunch of numbers. Great.
right,
What do they
right,
mean?
right.
How do we map that to something that's usable to me as a human?
Something like this.
Yeah, yeah.
something like that. And then this is your connection to the outside world. Um, this is how you use the skills in this course to join a team of people who have different expertise and are building real stuff.
Right.
Just learn how to read this, for example. And then we have this placeholder, what to do when none of the above actually works.
Right.
And
Right.
then placeholders for contribution and example projects.
Right. So what to do when nothing none of the above works. I love that one.
Those are your
That's
words, yeah.
I know, and it's so right though, right? Because that's exactly what happens is like what things. Oh, you can add a. Oh, go ahead. Phone a friend. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Getting stuck with Nilo. What's
Oh, did I really say that? Oh, that's good.
perfect?
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Great. All right. Um, so, okay, here's what I'm thinking. This is, I mean, we want to build this. We have more tools than ever. And what really stood out for me was when you were talking earlier about how for almost all of these, there's a code example somewhere that was written for some reason.
Right.
And what will be really exciting is to compile those examples and just use them as all the example code we basically need for this course. When we did Aiken, for example, Hinson wrote all the examples from scratch because he had a very particular way that he wanted people to understand testing
Right.
framework. And we really wanted people to build up their knowledge of testing as they worked through those lessons. Uh,
Right.
so many of the examples already exist. They need to be
Yeah,
compiled, but that's something that a handful of people could take on this summer, right?
for sure.
And
For
so
sure.
if I bring a proposal to Gimbalabs tomorrow saying, "Hey, can we put some ADA aside so
Right.
that for a week or two this summer, if somebody wants to ping Chris and say, "Hey, I'm writing these lessons. Can you shoot me some existing examples?" Would you be open to getting a message like that?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Absolutely. Obviously, encourage them to try to find it themselves
Right.
because almost everything, like I said, is going to be in Blink Labs code. And truthfully, it's going to be in probably about 5 or 6 repos
Right,
for
right,
most.
right,
I just mean is where the bulk of it is going to be because that is where the bulk of our code is.
right.
Um, Yeah, and one of the things that I do think is kind of interesting about it is by using examples that are from, like real life code,
Mhm,
they don't necessarily 100% match the use case that we're asking for.
mhm,
So it kind of requires a little bit of proof of understanding, right? To be able to adapt to where it's like I said, we're going to show someone and we're going to show them, code from TX top, but obviously that's not what they're building. They're building something different, so it's like they have to take this code out of TX top and figure out, oh, well, why is this happening over here? How do I put it into my code? So it's not something like a library they can directly import, right? It'll be something that they have to port themselves. Yep.
this feel.
Sounds good.
And this is, I mean, so much of what you're leading is the charge to put just quality open source code out there. So, right, if this course really emphasizes that, look, the code is out there.
Yeah.
We're going to tell you a bit about how it works. We're going to show you some hands-on examples of how to do some things so that you can wrap your mind around what this is. And then we're going to give you some ideas for what to try.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, so I saw one of them that we didn't have anything kind of filled in for back under way back here under our contributing, right? Was that guy empty? I think it was. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
complete.
Yeah.
Um, so I think one of the things that's kind of interesting here, maybe we just write it down. I don't know if it's as a target or just as the description notes or whatever to kind of get an idea of what we're going to do. Um, yeah, yeah, I guess it was in here, right? I don't know where you do this.
Wrote an intro.
Sure, sure, sure. So a lot of this, I think, also goes into some things that are more generic, like how to determine and follow repository
Yeah.
contributing
Yeah.
guides,
Right.
right? So like how to know how to contribute, because different projects have different rules. Like how do we find those rules? Right. I mean, like you go into a project, you want to look for things, you want to look for a license, you want to look for how to contribute, you want to look for, and am assuming you're with the intent of
Right.
contributing as you're going to look for these things, but like, what are the things that you need to care about? Do they have a contributor license agreement or any kind of process that you have to follow? Right. That sort of thing. And we can show them. Um, and then the other thing would be testing. I'm just going to say tools and methodologies. Just I meant testing tools and methodologies, all kind of all as one thing. Um, and by that I just mean a lot of the stuff that's going to be much more likely to happen. What kind of like lint software linting people are doing, what kind of security scanning people are doing, that sort of stuff. And like there's a fairly common set, especially with all of our code. There's a very common set. We use the same things everywhere. Um, so we can show those specific things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Cool.
yeah.
Well,
And I
then,
mean, we have all of this kind of stuff, even with Blink Lab stuff. So we can use them as an example, right?
yeah. Yeah. Well, and if the highest level of success for a course like this is somebody comes along who you look at them and you're like, oh shit, I could use your newly found skills and talents here.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, we got to cover this part at the end. Um, all right, so we have a little intro there,
Mhm.
contributing example projects as a placeholder. I can take that intro and build out. Oops, where'd it go? It's just real. I didn't save it. Yeah, there's a couple of bugs in Andamio. That's okay. We recorded that, so I can just go back to the recording.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got it.
Cool, cool,
Yeah, yeah. So I think that would definitely work.
great. Yeah, let me finish up these SLTs. This has long been something we want, and I think this model of focusing on existing code and just helping people understand it is a really exciting one as the core experiment here.
Right, right. And the point is rather than showing them the toy implementation, we want them to build the toy implementation by
Yes.
picking apart real implementations.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
essentially it.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit of the opposite of, as you were saying, kind of the aching course, whereas they wrote specific code to show specific points. We're instead asking them to write the very easy specific code to show a specific point by pulling it from uh, you know, in the wild code. Right.
We're going to show you the in the wild code and then give you the project of building the toy implementation so that you can then build your own new things.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I like that. All right. Can work with this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, right? It's like take this concept and turn it into the hello world of this concept.
yes, that's
Just
really that. What a fun project that actually is, right? Rip this out.
yeah,
Actually, I could speak to that. That's exactly what I did when I learned how to use Adder the first time. That's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
It's
I
a,
mean,
it's a
and that's the point, right? Is you want to take what looks hard,
right.
you look at our code or you look at this code somewhere, and you're like, oh wow, that's hard. It's a big project,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So now you want to take it and you want to simplify it down.
Great.
It's like, okay, how do I use this thing? How do I get an event through it? How do I get this through it? Right.
That's right.
And that's what we're doing is we're breaking it down and we end up building that simplistic toy version, as we're going along. And then by the end of it, you should be able to now you see a real project and you see your toy version and you've slowly built up your toy version. And now you should be able to fill in the gap,
Right.
right? You should be able to now go to building a real
Well, and
project.
so much of it is patterns, right? For me, it's one thing. It's nice to see adder logging to my console, but it's a much different feeling, even if the data I have is completely trivial, to have saved that data to an SQLite database and be able to query some custom shape, right? And
Right.
when I see that entire pathway, then I'm like, all right, I got the whole pattern now. Now I can
Yep.
start being creative inside of this.
Exactly.
Good. 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 So yeah, this is one of those like as people have time, but I think it's going to be really exciting to build it. Um, and let's keep looking for, at the end of this rainbow, are there some like good first issues then we can have somebody come and try to achieve if they've done this course.
For
Uh,
sure.
that'll be a fun loop to close. All right. Um,
Absolutely.
where we have a list of proposals that were like introduced last week at Gimbalabs, so we're gonna go through the consent process on each of those first. Um, but if I can sneak this one in at the end, I will. And if not, we'll have a way to asynchronously um, get some fun work going because of what I mentioned about Odin. It's going to be new projects launching all the time there.
Very cool.
Lewis, Adrian, Nelson, Jorge, hey guys. Any thoughts or questions based on what we were just talking about? Newt, hey,
Hello, hello. No, no questions regarding this subject.
good thanks. Nelson, thumbs up. All right, then we got a plan. It's the last day of school, so it's fun to be dismissed early on the last day of school. Uh, I say we call it. It's been a really good spring semester here in the Northern Hemisphere. Um, And I'm excited for what's next. If we work on building out some of this content over the next 3 months, then we can look at having a cohort of people working through it as students when the academic calendar picks up again in September.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. If you're watching this video on YouTube, check gimbalabs.com/calendar. Look up Blink Labs on GitHub. Look up Gimbal Labs on GitHub. They're easy to find. And find your way over to our Discord servers. You'll find links to all of that as well. And yeah, you can see that we have a project to work on over the next few months. If this is interesting to you, be sure to be in touch.
Yeah, and you can find links to the Blink Labs Discord on blinklabs.io.
Really good server. High signal, low noise. Um, Good things, y'all. And on behalf of Professor Mix, who once again is celebrating with his sweetheart this week, we miss you and we're so excited. Thanks for all the teaching you've done. And I'm sure we'll find some use for those videos and some of these lessons. All right, y'all. Till next time. Thanks.